Our previous video, we discussed about what is hellfire. Does God torment people in hellfire? And this is the part 2 of the video, the continuation of the video. Our last statement on that first part of the video was, what about the rich man and Lazarus? In Luke chapter 16, verse 19 to 31, Jesus told the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Remember, Jesus always used parables, not a literal description of the afterlife. Not a literal description of the afterlife. I'm meant to believe that it illustrates a reversal in spiritual standing between the religious leaders of Jesus' day and humble people who accepted his message. According to the Bible, Luke chapter 16, verse 19 to 31 is a parable, not a literal account of what happens after death. Jesus always used symbolic language to teach a lesson about the attitudes of people toward God's kingdom. Jesus often taught in parables. Note that Jesus frequently introduced illustrations in a similar way. The purpose was to teach spiritual truth rather than describe the afterlife in literal detail. The story about the rich man and Lazarus was never real. It was a parable. It was a parable. It was not something that happens in a real life. Examples include Luke 15, verse 11 to 32, about the prodigal son. That event does not happen. It was an illustration. He used those illustrations to teach a lesson. Luke chapter 10, verse 30 to 37, about the Good Samaritan. It was also a parable. It was not something that happened in real life. It was a parable. Jesus Christ used it to teach a lesson. The rich man and the Lazarus was also a parable. It belongs to this same style of teaching. For example, let me ask you a question. Could a single drop of water cool someone suffering in literal frames? 16 verse 24. It's a question. Could a single drop of water cool someone suffering in literal frames? 2. People in heaven and hell carry on conversations across a great chasm. Luke 16 verse 26. Would Abraham, rather than God or Christ, be the one receiving the righteous into blessedness? All these details fit a symbolic story better than a literal description. Who does the rich man represent? The rich man symbolizes the Jewish religious leaders, especially the Pharisees. Why? They enjoy positions of influence and religious privilege. 2. They believe they were spiritually rich. 3. They rejected Jesus and opposed his preaching. Relevant verses include Luke chapter 16 verse 14. Now the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, were listening to all these things, and they began to sneer at him. Matthew 23, 13, 29 and 33. Jesus strongly condemned the religious leaders. Now, who does Lazarus represent? Lazarus represents humble, oppressed people who accepted Jesus' message. These include 4 people: tax collectors, sinners who repented, Jesus' disciples. Now the question is, what does Lazarus' death mean? Lazarus' death was not literally. Instead, it symbolizes a change in spiritual condition. Those who accepted Jesus moved from spiritual neglect to God's favor. Being carried to Abraham's side represents receiving God's approval and the blessings associated with Abraham's covenant. What does the rich man's death mean? The rich man's death symbolizes the end of the privileged spiritual standing of the religious leaders. After rejecting Jesus, they lost God's favor. The Christian congregation became God's people. Their former position ended. What do the torment represent? The torment is not literal fire. Instead, it symbolizes the anguish and judgment experienced by those religious leaders when Jesus and his followers exposed their hypocrisy and announced God's judgment against them. Supporting passages include Matthew 23, verse 33 to 38, Acts 2, verse 37, and Acts chapter 7, verse 51 to 54. Now, why mention Abraham? Abraham represents the covenant through which God's promises would be fulfilled. Being at Abraham's side symbolizes being accepted by God as heirs of those promises. Now, this brings us to another question. What is the lake of fire being described as Revelation chapter 20, verse 14? In our next video, we are going to discuss about it. Remember, we have already discussed what that rich man and Lazarus means, why it was symbolic, not literal meaning.